Good evening. Welcome, all you spooky people, to Bridging the Seen and Unseen. How are you, Miss Gwen?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh my gosh. I don't know what it is. Everybody, if you're on here, go in and check your StreamYard because on Messenger and things like that, it is erasing the three dots, especially if you're using your phone. So the only way that I was able to get on is when Gwen sent me the text message. So you might want to go in and check because I mean, other people aren't having, but I just talked to two other people that are also having issues with StreamYard using it that way. But how are you?
I'm good. We had our powwow this weekend and it was awesome. So
How did all that go? Did I mean, like, how many people showed up there?
we know of 1,000, but there were other folks. Plus, there were people helping the performers, the vendors. We had like 40 vendors. I don't know the exact count, but yeah, we had so much. It was awesome.
Well, I know that you had the bearded nipple out there.
Yeah, we did.
I know. I saw him out there, and I'm very surprised I didn't see him with his shirt up like this. You know, trying to show everybody his little beard nipple. You know, whatever. But yeah, he's a great guy. I'm glad you guys had an amazing time. But tonight, guys, listen, we got two people, and it's Pam Harris and Steve Workman, and they have this book. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And if I'm going to get them to tell you guys about it, it's A Bug's Life Before the Mafia. And let's go ahead and bring them on.
Hello.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are y'all?
Bitchin'.
I'm sorry. You know, I didn't want you guys to necessarily hear. I didn't want y'all to hear right off about the bearded nipple and all that kind of stuff right there. But there's an inside to that. And Brandon Cooper, if you're watching, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Sounds like something you can keep inside.
Yeah. But listen. If he was on here right now, he would have no problem showing you.
No,
Not one
none.
problem.
He would have none.
Some things just need to be unseen.
That's the issue why I say it is because I can't unsee it. When I think about him, that's what he did. He did it on my show. He did it to me on the phone. He did it to me on several different places. So I don't know if I can see Brandon Cooper without a nipple.
Well, that's because you've been traumatized.
Probably. Most likely. I have. So how are you two?
Good.
We're doing well, thank you.
Thank you so much for the invite to read that book. I listened to it on the Audible, and it was so intriguing. So, before I start, with questions or whatever, was this a book that you guys wanted to do just to kind of trace back your family, or was it something, or have you found other family members?
Yes, we have found other family members, and no, this was not intended for a book.
It wasn't.
Well, no, I had wanted to write a book, but Steve was reluctant and said, nobody's going to want to read it besides family, so it'll probably just be a pamphlet.
So there's a long story to it. And
Yeah.
Basically,
We got time. We got an hour, guys. So please tell us.
Okay.
so we can get more details later, but basically our dad was looking for his dad since he was 6 years old. We'll tell you the story and how it fits, but basically at 6 years old, he saw his dad drive away and he didn't understand what was going on. And so throughout his life, he was looking for his dad, doing research and finding other things. And in the process, he ended up researching his own family history. He looked at all the sources he had available to him. He passed away in 98. And so he didn't have the internet. He didn't have all of those.
Yeah, you didn't. We didn't have that back then. So.
Right. And so all he could do is go to the library, look at microfiche, write letters to people he, might be his relatives, share what he had, and they shared with him. And so basically, Pam picked up all that research. And again, she's looking for genealogy information. And so she's picked this up after he passed away. And so as she put this together, basically in a file, she shared it with me, and I kind of organized it and structured it like into chapters. And one of our cousins became aware of this, what we were doing, and he knew what our dad was doing before and had listened to our dad's stories. And actually his kids had listened to our dad's stories that we weren't aware of. And so he told Pam, this is great information. You need to put it into a book. And she shared that with me, and I was rather skeptical. I said, okay, who's going to be interested in this? This is going to be enough information for a family pamphlet on what we found and what we have. And so we did a podcast, I think in March.
Yeah, March.
And Pam had shared the most recent version we had just before that. And 2 days later, it was Vicky Peplow contacted us with an email and said, here's your manuscript. Are you ready to publish? And we're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is not the most recent version. And we need about a week because we're hearing new stories that we had never heard before from our cousin's kids and our other cousin that we really want to incorporate in there. So we finished that. And then it was published mid-March, and it's out available on Amazon. And sometimes what it helps the audience understand about the book is it's on Amazon. You can go to the Amazon search bar. If you type in Charlie the Bug, it'll come up. You type in Pam's name or my name, it will come up.
Nice.
But I thought there's just a couple paragraphs here on the book overview that might help your audience kind of get a picture about the book. So it's okay if I read that?
Absolutely.
All right. Join us as we delve into our family's narrative, one filled with secrets, connections, and threads that weave us together across time and space. This is not just history. It is our truth as we understand it, shaped by the shadows of the past and the resilience of those who came before us. We used to believe no known associate of Murder Incorporated knew this information you are about to read. It turns out they did know, and they kept an eye on our family and reported to Charlie the Bug. Embark on this journey with us as we explore challenges of piecing together our lineage in a world where disappearing meant becoming someone new. Discover the tales that have defined us and the bonds that unite us, even when our paths are unclear. In early March of 2005, we thought the book was ready to be published. Our research was complete. Family stories were documented. And the day before releasing the manuscript to be published, a family member told us a story we had not heard before. Included and further confirms the Bug's life before the Mafia.
This is where we bow.
This is it's so fascinating, man, because when I was listening to that, I try to I'm a visual person. I like to I do the same thing with the Bible. It's like I see things in different perspectives, especially when I'm listening. And I was listening about Charlie, and I'm like okay, so and it's just fascinating because wasn't he married like 2 or 3 times?
So,
So you guys literally have lineage of, I mean, have you met different people from those marriages?
so the story begins in Churubusco, Indiana. Charlie is born. Well, let me back up and tell you how we know that. So our dad, doing this research, I think it was one of his cousins, sent him copies out of this book titled Workman Family History. It's a hardbound book about that thick, and our dad and his mom are listed in it, and it goes back to the 1600s.
Oh, wow.
And so what they did is they traced the family
Scotland.
genealogy through birth records, divorce records, all the government records, until they got back to the beginning of America. And then they went to England and Scotland and went through church records, because church records would have baptisms, marriages, deaths, and things like that. So he got that information, and it listed Charlie as his dad and Charlie's parents as well. So Charlie was married to another woman. I don't recall the date, so not to get people lost, but he was married to another woman. I think he was about 17, right?
Yeah.
And they had a son named Robert. And then they got divorced. And later on, he married our grandmother, and they had 4 kids. Which way?
4 more.
The camera. They had 4 kids. Still going the wrong way. They had 4 kids. And so the story that our family was always told is his previous wife came to our grandmother.
The one that he left.
The one that he left.
With 4 children already.
No. His previous marriage to our grandmother.
With the first child, Robert.
With the first child. He divorced her and then married our grandmother. Shortly after that, the family story that we have is his previous wife came to our grandmother with his son and said, "I'm too sick to raise this boy. Will you take him and raise him?" That was the family story. And that was this, family stories are the truth known at the time. And so that was our family story up until
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay. And so through this research, Pam found descendants of that woman because
the first wife,
because she got married again and had other children, and they knew the story of Charlie and her first son. And when Pam shared our family story with him about the son, they said, "Well, we heard it differently. We heard it that Charlie left with his son and wouldn't give him back, right. and our grandmother chased Charlie." And we think their story is probably closer to the truth than our story.
How about the first marriage of Charlie? Because it said that he had children or whatever, and then he ended up just leaving.
So his first marriage is what he's talking about. His first marriage, he had Robert. His second marriage is our grandmother. They had 4 more kids. That made 5.
Yeah.
And so just as the youngest of those 4 was just a month or so, maybe 3 months old, Charlie leaves all 5 kids and his new wife. That in 1929, he left and ended up in New York. In New York, we found marriage certificate. He married another woman and had a son. And he, on whatever forms he needed to fill out, he said his birthday was 1908, which then made him 10 years younger. So he was basically leaving his identity behind
as a different person. Yeah.
person, and he also magically he was now Jewish, whereas before his previous family with our grandmother, they were Christian, and that's supposedly where they met, was at a Christian church picnic.
That's where he met his first wife.
His first wife.
His first wife with the son he met at a church picnic is what we were told by the family. So that book's right there.
I don't see it. I'm looking for the PGA book.
This should be there.
Uncle Charlie, unfortunately.
Let's see.
Alan.
Where is it? It's over here, probably. Anyway, I mean on the other desk. So he leaves his first wife with one child, comes to the second, has 4 more, leaves 5.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, I don't remember where you
Did
left.
he take care of those kids?
Yes.
I mean, were they? I'm just asking. The first wife that had the children said that raised them herself. She never tried to go and find Charlie, or she just let him live his life.
Well, nobody knew for sure where he went. There was family stories, but no one knew for sure. All they knew is he's not here anymore. He left.
Right. So
Where did Chicago come into that, though?
Okay, so his first wife with the one son, the first wife's father told him he could find work in Chicago.
And
So evidently he didn't have a job.
this was the late 20s.
Yeah, late.
Right.
Good. So he was looking for nothing to do with mafia. He was looking for work to support his family. And so he was told he could find work in Chicago. And I was it with Minnie he said you should come?
No.
Okay.
The
Really?
first wife, her dad said you need to go be with your husband, and she goes to Chicago. She goes back and realizing that their marriage was over. They didn't really have a relationship. So they got a divorce. Actually, I think Charlie filed for the divorce. I don't know who filed, but anyway, they both put in, what their problem was. But then he marries our grandmother, and they are together for at least 6 years because our dad was the oldest of those 4 children.
And he's back in Indiana.
And he's in Indiana. So I don't know what happened that he left Chicago and came back. I don't know. So we've theorized that he probably went to Chicago initially, and part of that is because some stories we put in the book that our cousin told us that our dad said over and over, stories that we'd never heard before. One of them is when our dad was a boy playing in the park, he would see this black car, and it stood out to him because it was a fancy car, a Cadillac or something. And so it kind of caught his eye, even as a young boy. And he couldn't see who was in it. The guy had a hat hiding his face. But the story he told our cousin was, more than once when he saw that happen, he went home and found an envelope in the mailbox full of money. And he did this to explain the envelope. There was money in the envelope. So that happened a couple times. So our theory is he couldn't have done that from New York. We think he went to initially
to Chicago, came back on occasion now and then, but then it stopped. And so that's probably when he went to New York. And so Pam's research found records of him being married again in New York.
No. You guys, do you both think that maybe his commitment issues that he had towards your mom, other women, things like that, were because of the secretive ties that he had with the mafia?
Well, I think he had those issues before he went into the mafia, and the reason he checked on them, and we found out later on he did even more checking from New York. We're not sure why, but possibly to protect the family that he left.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next.
Yeah. And again, that's our theory. That's what it feels like to not involve them in any way, and to become a different person in New York.
So there would be no repercussion to the family.
Right.
But at the same time, he was very, very trusted and respected.
Yeah.
And some people did know about his previous family. But again, it all became apparent to us much, much later in the research.
Right.
No, it said in there that he was like an upfront. He was a trusted man. Like if you heard that he was coming, did people fear him? Were they, because like I have an uncle. The reason why I'm asking, because I have an uncle. My grandparents came here from Ireland, and I have an uncle to this day that is part of the IRA. And that, it's very secretive there. But my uncle has a thing with politicians for some reason. He doesn't like them. Now, with Charlie, for instance, like when he would go, I know Murder Inc. There was a politician that was having issues with Murder Inc. And so who gave the go? Was it Charlie himself, or did someone give Charlie the go ahead to pull the trigger on that politician?
And so you've asked a couple questions. We've looked at all kinds of other books, movies, all kinds of documented history of the mafia, Murder Inc., and Charlie, and how our book is different. We know Charlie's history before the mafia. But to answer your question about was he feared, he was more respected. And the other information that we've read about him, he was very well respected in the neighborhood because he would go out of his way to take care of people, to be kind to people. And so in addition to his connections, there wasn't any ill will whatsoever in his surrounding neighborhood in New York and New Jersey. And so I'm going to tell the story about Dutch.
Please do.
Well, I want to say that he was known as the Bug because he kept his mouth shut. Okay.
Forget about it.
Is right. The other thing is there was different mafia groups.
Yep.
So they used each other. So,
the Italian mafia, you had to be from Sicily to be of any position of power.
Right.
The Jewish mafia, you didn't have to do that. And they found a way to work together. So
with the Italians.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he was a hitman for, right?
With each other. Mm-hmm. So the Italian mob would have, okay, we need to do this hit. They would go to the Jewish mob that had an army of hitmen. And they would be paid for the hit and take care of it. And so what the way that was sold between the two of them to cooperate was, okay, so we give them an assignment, and that hitman has no idea who it's from.
Mm-hmm.
It will be handed down through the ranks. They have no idea why it's being done. They just go do it. So they're kind of insulated. If anything happens, they get caught and they say, I don't know. They're telling the truth.
Right.
And they couldn't tell if they wanted to what was behind it.
Yeah, because they wouldn't have any information. So when it comes to the hit on Dutch Schultz, so what happens is Thomas Dewey, he's a prosecutor in New York.
Yeah.
He wants to prosecute all of Murder Inc.
Before they had even had a name.
Before they even had Murder Inc. name. So he's after everybody. Dutch Schultz says, I'm going to take this guy out because he's trying to put us all in prison or electrocute us in an electric chair. And so
he said he was going to get all of them, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, that was his goal.
Yeah.
But he was focusing on Dutch.
He was focusing on Dutch. And so Dutch knew that. So Dutch went to the commission.
Like a staff meeting, commission, right?
Of Mafia. It was like all the higher ups meeting and said, we got to take this guy out. And they said, look, we don't take out government officials, police officers. We don't do that. We can't.
Women, children, stuff like that.
Yeah, it would draw too many.
Not just women and children, but government officials and law enforcement, because it would bring too much heat on their organization.
Right.
And they're like, look, we can live with each other, but we can't do that. Right. Kind of reminds me of the Meatloaf song, right? Do that, but we can't do that. So Dutch was so pissed off and threatened by Thomas Dewey. He told the commission, well, if you won't do it, I will, and leaves the meeting, right? So the commission is like, we can't allow all this to happen. It's too much of a risk. It was very real risk. And so they assigned the hit to the Jewish mafia, got Charlie the Bug involved and Mindy Weiss and a driver named Piggy. And so that's what they did. So right before the hit on Dutch Schultz, Dutch had tailed Thomas Dewey. He knew his routine. He knew where he was going to do the hit. And it was probably less than 24 hours from actually doing it. And so Charlie does the hit on Dutch, and the law enforcement at the time thought, oh, this is just a turf war between these organized crime people. There's nothing to it. We'll just leave it at that. And so, but the prosecutions continued, just like Dutch said, and they weren't just prosecuting people, sending them to prison. They were sending them to the electric chair.
Yeah.
Right. And so as time goes on, initially, so the FBI got involved, and initially their investigation was titled Fur Dress. And the reason for that was Louis Lepke was involved in New York City clothing issue with furs, and was getting all of the suppliers and the different companies to basically give him a cut of every transaction as things went through. So that's what they started investigating. And as they found different people, so the first, well, let me back up and tell you about the FBI file. So our dad in November of 97 wrote a letter to the FBI and said, and we found the copy of that letter. And he said, I'm looking for my father. From what I can tell, he was known as Charlie the Bug Workman and probably gave them more information than what they really needed.
Right.
2 months later, after that letter's dated, our dad passes away.
Mm.
Sometime later in the year, the FBI file arrives. And this is a copy our brother put together for us. It's pretty thick, full pages.
Wow.
And a lot of it, is redacted. So it's hard to see what's in there. But it starts in December of 38, and they actually continued to put stuff in the file even after Charlie went to prison.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, man.
Hey,
when he no, I know when he went to prison, didn't he do his first stint after that hit? Wasn't it like 30 years or something like that?
So what happened was the hit was in 35. They didn't even get to his trial until 40 or 41.
40.
And the only way they did that was some of the previous people involved were arrested and investigated, and they were facing murder charges to go to the electric chair. And they said, okay, if you give me life instead, I'll tell everything I know.
Mm.
One of the things they knew was about the hit on Dutch Schultz.
Right.
Well, they needed 2 people to say that. So I think it was a year later, it gets into 40 or 41, they get that second person.
Right.
So now they charge Charlie with murder of Dutch Schultz. And in the meantime, all of these guys are still being indicted, were already indicted for embezzling. Oh, I know what, for trying to harbor a criminal.
Because Lemke was hiding
Louis
out.
Lemke was hiding out.
Mm.
They were indicting these people for knowing where he was, and not even when they were arrested, they go, I don't know. So they were all indicted for that. But now Charlie's up on murder charges. And again, there's so many things written about the mafia and about Charlie, but they all kind of end the same. How they get there might be a little different.
Yeah, but none of them have the Indiana families.
Right.
None of them have any of that information. None of them have
Like
anything.
his life
that is-
before the mafia.
Right.
But many of them tell the same ending of the story. And even in the FBI file, they tell one story about how Charlie's trial progressed to a certain point. And what happened was he stood up and said, no contest, stopped his trial. And so what that means is, I'm not pleading guilty, but you have more evidence against me than what I can defend.
Right.
And so the end result is being sentenced. So you end up with the same point. And so he was sentenced to life in prison, which at the time
30 years.
was
Yeah.
12 and a half years.
At that,
12 and a half. Oh.
That was the first sentence.
that was the first, that's what their guideline was. That life in prison at the time was 12 and a half years.
And so that's what happened. So he would come up for parole on a regular basis.
And they fight it.
And at the time, when people came up for parole, it wouldn't be unusual to add another year or 2 years to their sentence. And they really wanted Charlie to talk. They felt they hadn't got everyone
Anything.
yet, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't. There were still some big ones out there. And so, true to his
reputation.
his reputation. Thank you. He didn't talk. He had
right.
nothing to say. And so they didn't add a year or two. They'd add 4 or 5 years.
Right. That's how he ended up from 12 and a half to 23.
He would come up again, wouldn't talk. They'd add another 4 or 5 years. So he ended up in prison for 23 years. In 1964, they figured everybody's dead. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter anymore.
And Murder
They
Inc. was over.
Yeah, they
Mhm.
actually, he got out of prison in 64.
Yeah.
Did they ever find anybody else? Because I know they were trying to prosecute Murder Inc. Did they ever find like some of the people that Charlie was with? Some of his
Of
did
course
they,
Yeah.
they did find them? They did find
Well,
Murder Inc.
yeah, they did because they knew who they were and they,
Let me get my phone.
you know, and they tracked them. I mean, they were in New York. So, yes, they got them. And some went to the electric chair.
Hmm.
You know,
Because I know a lot of mafia, they'll put themselves out in public eye, like they have no fear about anything. And I mean, I'm guessing like after that crackdown started happening, then they were like they weren't so out in public anymore, were they?
well, I don't know about that, but more so, they were talking to save their ass. They thought that they were going to save themselves from going to the electric chair. And in reality, you know.
Mm.
So that FBI file that I showed you.
Yep.
We've had it in the family since 98. We published our book. And I'm looking at the file. I told Pam, I've never read it. I've never read this file. We just looked at it. So that's interesting. It might be hard to read, bad copies, other things, but I never sat down and read the whole thing. So it took me most of a day, but it was after our book was published and I read it and I learned all kinds of things. That's where I learned how the investigation started, how it progressed, and how they charged all these people. And so I have a list of probably about a dozen people that names I got out of the FBI file, because they would list all of his associates and all of their aliases. And then I added to that how all of those people died.
Right.
And so one died in 76. Another one died that was assassinated actually with a mafia hit in 57. Everyone else died before then, except Charlie.
Yeah.
He was in prison until 64.
Wow.
And got out. And so Pam and I have been exchanging files and emails and almost every day, at least during this year and part of last year, a video, chat, basically going over this. Well, we can leave this part out. We should add this and expand that part. We've been going back and forth. We got to what we felt was a finished book and published it, but we didn't stop. We didn't stop our research. We didn't stop looking at things. And so we're still writing, and we've already started maybe another book.
That would be awesome, because I feel like it's still being written, because the more that you guys find out, and I'm sure there's stories, and when you guys were talking about the stories like that, it just reminded me, because everybody's got family stories. Like my family had stories with my grandparents, and my grandparents had stories about when they were kids. That's where they get to where, you walk to school uphill barefooted, that's where all that comes in. So there's really no telling, how much of it is authentic, but it sounds like a lot more of the people that you guys are related to all had the same pretty much idea of what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, our family all knew these stories throughout their life.
But not everyone knows all the stories.
Right.
And so later this week, we plan to have a family reunion just for that reason. Tell us what you know. Tell us what you know, and let's get as much complete as we possibly can, including going back to the descendants of Charlie's first wife. We're going to look at meeting with them and see what information and stories they might have to continue the Bug's life before the mafia.
You know,
Did he have any brothers, sisters?
you mean Charlie?
Yeah.
Yeah, his family, his immediate family's all gone.
And he passed away in 79.
Right.
But so that when he moved to New York and he had a son with his new wife, and so his son was 6 when he went to prison,
And 29 when he got out.
and 29 when he got out. Hello. And so his son, his family was very well taken care of.
Very
There
well.
was an envelope, and that's
Yeah.
how it's described,
Yeah.
delivered to his family, just like, our dad found. But this was on an ongoing basis the entire time he was in prison. And so his son became a PGA golfer. And his son wrote a book based on what he knew was true at the time. So my point is his son had no clue about Charlie's previous life in Indiana.
Right.
All he knew was, what he was told and what he actually witnessed. And so his son wrote a book called From Murder Incorporated to the PGA Tour.
Oh,
And so these are his family stories and his story about his dad and he was slightly famous, a PGA golfer. And so he picked up Charlie's life when he got out of prison and talked all about that. And so
that's fascinating, guy. I mean, it really is fascinating how everything just kind of links in together. But it really does sound like, all thing, no matter how hard or whatever Charlie was, at least he did care about his family. He may have had a very oblong way of expressing how he cared about his family, but at least he did, and I mean, like, money was in the mailboxes. Now, was that for all his children?
We don't know.
All we know
we know is that his wife in New York, they had someone they took care of his family.
The mafia provided
Right.
money to his wife and kid while he was in prison.
The whole
entire
23
time.
years.
And his son writes, he wasn't supposed to associate with anyone in an organization like that, but he did. And they would continuously provide him with envelopes.
Right.
Mm.
So, the amount of money that was given to our grandmother, we don't really know. We just know that.
You guys don't have an estimate on how much she.
No, I mean, I'm sure she wasn't given the same that the other wife was.
Like we said, it's a story we never heard growing up, but our cousin was very familiar with, and it was only while our dad was young, it stopped.
Right.
So I don't know if it happened
continue.
2 times or 4 times, but it stopped.
Yeah.
Did she ever struggle? Did your grandmother ever struggle? Because I mean, you said she was took care of though.
Because she was left with 5 kids, and she was steaming clothes or
a steam cleaner or something. What she ended up doing, and then so shortly later she married another man, and so if you read the book, she married another man that assumed the role of father for those 5 kids, and all of the grandkids. I can tell you, that was our grandfather.
Right, that's our grandfather.
And so, if you read the book in my my about me section, in 1966, my grandfather Raleigh Walsh died, I was 11 years old. My older siblings told me, he wasn't your real grandfather. I didn't know.
We didn't know.
I had
any
no
different.
idea. So that
Because
started
it
my
wasn't something
education
that was,
on the family.
Yeah.
So she did struggle, and what we thought was that was the end of Charlie. He's gone, and no one ever heard from him again, which is pretty much the case. But what we found out through some of these stories is he wanted information on how all of his kids were doing. So
Charlie did?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sent people back to check on them on a regular basis, which we had no clue of until we talked to our cousin, who said, I had these experiences with these people when his brother was in the hospital, just happened to be in New York and was dying. And then similar experiences at our dad's funeral, at other funerals. And what happened was he just asked them straight out, who are you and why are you here? And so his story is, and we found it kind of hard to believe at first, he said, look, I'm here representing Charlie Workman. Nobody wants to know about his offsprings. And this person told our cousin he was previously married, and he named her, your grandmother, named all the kids, named their wives, which like our mom and our aunts and uncles, they knew
all the names.
And we found that kind of hard to believe. Why would the mafia admit that to one of the offsprings of Charlie's kid? And it just didn't make any sense because they don't talk.
Right.
No, they don't.
And so Pam and I looked at that and then backed away from the research that we had and looked at it and went, wait a minute, this happened here. And and previously we figured out Charlie had been dead 11 years.
When that happened.
And so it made more sense. So they were following up on his wishes and they felt more comfortable talking because it was over.
Right.
Charlie wasn't there to be challenged or have to defend himself. It was over, but they were continuing on his behalf, checking on his kids.
So what kind of questions did you have, Shane, after reading it?
Well, I've talked about a lot of the stuff that I just think it's fascinating. I just think, because, you said he took care of his kids and he always checked on that. But let's say, like, if he gets to a point to where he's, he passes away, does that stop? Does that stop of them taking care? Okay.
About 5 minutes. Okay. Just
And so that's the point.
Sorry.
And so that's kind of the point of the story is that Charlie passed away in 79. In the 90s, the mafia was still checking on his offspring.
Yeah.
In the 90s?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I say, 11 years after he passed away is when our cousin had those experiences.
Right. So
that at
Charlie's
first we found hard to
gone
believe.
but he's still given the respect.
See, that's awesome. And I don't think regular people can really understand the respect level that they had. I mean, because people, they always have this criminal mindset when they think of the mafia and stuff like that. But, like my uncle's part of the IRA, and I mean, he has this big old pinky ring and stuff like that. My grandfather was 6'4", 285 pounds from Dublin, Ireland. And when my uncle would walk into the room, which was his father, when my uncle walked into the room, it shut my grandfather down. There was just a different level there.
So in the time we have left, I want to try and do two things. Are there any questions in the chat that we can answer?
Yeah.
No.
I think everybody was just listening.
Okay.
I think it's fascinating.
You were explaining well. So yeah.
Okay.
And I've read it. I read it before you did the changes. And
You
then I
did?
went back
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
and then I
Good.
saw the changes and I was like,
Yeah.
well, cool. That was awesome. Actually, you added it in there.
And
Yeah.
so I want to share the paranormal tie-in, if you will.
Sure.
So before we were putting this together, Pam was still working on it, but before we decided to make a book, Michael and Marty Perry are mediums that
Yeah.
I've been involved with since about 2003.
That drawing, right? Is that
Right.
Yeah.
So my involvement has been having readings with them and knowing about them and kind of following their history. And so I think it was in 2022, we had a remote reading with them with our older sister and my wife and I. And we told Charlie, I can't get him off my tongue.
Michael.
We told Michael about the book and what was going on, and we were doing research on Charlie. And so those of you that know Michael and Marty, while Michael is reading directly, Marty is sketching and drawing portraits.
Mhm.
So Marty drew this portrait, and we had no idea of who it was. We didn't recognize him, and we put it in the book. And what Michael told me is I get the impression that this man is very calm all the time. And I didn't think about it at the time, but I put it in. I thought it later. I said, "So cool as a bug."
Yeah.
Right.
Cool the bug. Yep.
Cool as a bug.
Yep.
And so just this past weekend, we met with Michael and Marty again, not with a reading, but actually showed them the book and showed them different pictures in the book. And they looked at Marty's drawing again, and they both were talking to us separately.
Mm.
And they both said, that's likely Charlie.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then,
All right.
And then Marty came over after Michael looked at it and had the same conclusion. That's likely Charlie.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we're gonna have to cut it because Gwen's got another show immediately. But I would love to have you guys back on to continue this conversation. It's fascinating to me, and I appreciate you two taking your time out because I think everybody should read this book. I think everybody will be blessed by listening to it, reading it, doing whatever. But I thank you both for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I just
Rob.
want to say thank you to Lee Triana Brown for creating our cover, and thank you to All Access Network, and thank you, Vicki Peplow.
Yes.
If you do read the book on Amazon, please leave a review. That is so important.
Yep.
So if you haven't left your review, Gwen, you need to do a review.
I do.
I do.
I totally forgot. I apologize for that.
So maybe, Shane, you can put together a panel that have read the book that would have
then
questions
come
for
back.
us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll definitely look in because that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell everybody to read that book.
I'm gonna drop you
You
guys
know.
down so you can sign
All
out.
right,
You can
guys.
talk
Take
to
care.
John.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Guys,
Shane,
that's
sorry
an awesome. I know Gwen's got to go, but guys, please, A Bug's Life Before the Mafia, go check it out. It's such an interesting book. You will not be disappointed. It's a short read too, guys. It's only like 50 something pages. So please go in and see it. And if you need to reach out to them, Pam and Steve, they're such great people. So just feel free to go. And you guys have a good week. Stay tuned for next week. We got another good guest. And you guys stay safe, be blessed always, and stay spooky, people. Peace.